Welcome to the Wellness Revolution podcast.
Thanks again for joining Dr. Veronica's Wellness Revolution. Today, we're going to talk about that subject that stresses a lot of us, and that is wheat and gluten. So people are like saying it's fake, it's not fake, it's a fad. We're going to work on that today because I have a lady who's been doing this for over 30 years and actually wrote a best-selling book. She comes all the way from Australia. Changing Habits, Changing Lives. Is that what the book is called? Cyndi O'Meara, Changing Habits, Changing Lives. Is that the right name of the book? Yes? Okay. So
that is the name of the book. I wrote that in 1998.
1998. So she's been helping people about changing their lives, and it's about changing habits. And there are strategies to being able to change habits. And changing those habits you may think are hard, but the same way you develop a habit that's not serving you, you can develop a habit that will serve you and get you to the results. But there is a strategy to do it that actually works, and it's pretty easy because I've learned that strategy. The first few days are tough, but then once you figure out changing one thing at a time and how to do it, it's absolutely amazing that you can develop. You could probably develop 12 new habits a year and doing it nice and slow, but that's a whole nother story. We're going to talk about wheat. So Cyndi has a distinction of having this movie, this documentary, What's with Wheat. What'swithwheat.com. You can watch it on Netflix, but this is her baby, her production. And I decided, she's all the way from Australia, but we were having a wheat discussion one day online. And I said, I got to get this lady on my show so that her word gets out. The word's out in Australia. We got to get it out here more in America so that we can help people understand what are the truths, what are the myths, and if you decide that getting rid of wheat out of your diet is a strategy that's going to help your particular health, then what do I do and how do I do that? So Cyndi O'Meara, welcome to the Wellness Revolution. Thanks for coming all the way from Australia, and you just happen to be in America right now.
I do. Thank you, Dr. Veronica.
So start by your story. I understand usually people don't just give up wheat because they decide one day wheat is bad and I'm giving them up. They usually have issues that made them say, I got to get off of this. So what is your story?
Yeah. Well, I'm from a family that actually died young. So my mum is the oldest of 11. She had 7 brothers, 6 had hemophilia. And from that family, we have diabetes, type 1 diabetes, we have cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer. My mum died of lung cancer. My sister died of an autoimmune disease called CREST. So I not got the greatest genetic lottery. So I decided that prevention was the key. So I did anthropology through university. I did nutrition through university and human anatomy. And I knew how to prevent disease. I had done all the research and I ate that way all of my life. I brought my children up. They've never had any medications. I've not had any medications. So I knew what I was doing. And then I got to 49 and I started to put on weight. I'd never put on weight before. I got a sore right hip, so sore that I thought I was going to have some sort of operation because I was in so much pain with it. My back, my lower back for 18 months was just constantly sore, anxiety, dry skin, dry hair. I was breaking down and I thought, this can't be 50. But being a nutritionist, I thought, why don't I just do an elimination? Why don't I eliminate everything and see if it's a food that I'm consuming? Because I'm very much into elimination before I start to test. It's just what I do. So I eliminated everything but flesh foods, so very, very small amounts of lean meats, fish and chicken, green vegetables till they were coming out my ears, and a couple of fruits. And in 3 weeks, every symptom that had ever come about disappeared completely. In actual fact, I lost 9 kilos in Australia would be 18 to 20 pounds in 3 weeks, which I never put back on again. And when I introduced the foods back into the diet, I recognized that wheat was my biggest problem. As soon as I put wheat back in, I started to put the weight, I put on, I think in a 24-hour period, I put on 1.5 pounds, which is water weight. It's inflammation. My sore back came back. My anxiety came back, all in 24 hours. So I went, well, what's wrong with wheat? I've done anthropology. We needed wheat. Wheat was a part of our culture. And so I went on a bit of an exploratory education adventure and met the most amazing people and decided other people need to know about this. Here I was, a nutritionist, and I have been for 37 years. How could I have not known about this? So that's why I did the documentary, because my husband said to me, would you like to write another book about it? And I went, no, I don't. And he said, why don't you do a documentary? So that was why the documentary came about. It was him who said, let's do a doco.
Yeah, so because we're all different types of learners, so it's wonderful that you did a documentary. There are many books out about this, but to be able to go and watch it with a storyline is very informative. And, you know, everybody's Netflix binging these days. So wonderful idea to do that. So start with telling us a little bit of background about why wheat is such a big deal. So let me just give a little background on some things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you're going to hit on some of these topics too. I noticed that when I'm here in this country and I eat wheat, I have a lot of problems. Muscle aches and pains are some of the first things that I will get way before any stomach upset or anything like that has happened. So if you're getting aches and pains, you think, I'm just getting old, and that's why I'm getting aches and pains. My stomach just doesn't work as well anymore. But aches and pains is something that I get. Now, I've noticed that my husband, his family's in France. We go visit France. I will go to France. They're eating bread, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes there's not other choices there. I don't speak French, and they're very polite, and so I feel like I cannot ask for other things necessarily. They're eating wheat, they're eating dairy, I'm eating wheat, I'm eating dairy, and I feel fine, no aches and pains. So talk a little bit about wheat, sourcing, all that other stuff that makes a difference in the process of how different people deal with wheat.
Yeah. Well, traditionally, the first wheat, they believe, was about 23,000 years ago, and it was called einkorn. It wasn't corn, but that was just what it was called, was einkorn. So that was the first wheat. Then it was a monoploid, and then it crossed with another grass and became a diploid, and that was emmer wheat. So when you're in Europe, you're consuming einkorn or emmer wheat, the old traditional wheats. But here in the US and in Australia, about 1980, a new wheat was hybridized. So it wasn't genetically modified, it was hybridized. And this hybridization shortened the stem, made it a greater yield, but not necessarily made it a more nutritious food. But I don't think that that was the defining thing that happened. It was one of the things, and Wheat Belly, William Davis in his book Wheat Belly talks about it. So he talks about the hybridization being a major issue. But what I indicated in my movie is there were many things that accumulated, and then there was the one other thing that happened that was like the perfect storm that created this issue that we're now seeing. Because I was brought up in the 60s and 70s. Everybody ate wheat. Nobody had a problem with it. And that's why people think it's a fad. It's not a fad. We have to go back to our traditional wheat, and we have to prepare them properly, and we have to stop eating it breakfast, lunch, dinner, in our medications, in our vitamins and minerals, on our skin. Like, it's everywhere. It's like when we started looking at it, like the program that we've done, we've identified everything that has wheat in it, and it goes for pages. It's not just bread, pasta, cookies, crackers, things like that. It is in so many things. And if you have a sensitivity to gluten, you're just going to set your immune system up to continue to give you aches and pains, anxiety, skin issues, mental issues. Like, we are realizing that it is affecting the nervous system. So, but I think that the straw that broke the camel's back was that a new agricultural chemical started to be used. And this agricultural chemical actually is being patented as a biocide. So it goes before planting, but it also can be used 3 weeks after harvest, or before harvest, and it stays in the grain. And as you eat it, not only have you not prepared it properly and you're eating way too much of it and it's been hybridized, but it has a chemical in it that kills the very ability of your body to digest the wheat, which is, the chemical is called glyphosate, otherwise known as Roundup. So this is the issue, is that we're destroying, we're not only eating lots of it's inherently inflammatory, we're not preparing it the old-fashioned way like they do in France with, you know, the old sourdoughs, but we're destroying the gut microbiome that gives us that ability to break down the proteins, break down gluten, break down gliadin, so we can use the amino acids. So that's, in a nutshell, what has happened to our wheat.
So you mentioned something else that, you know, I read some books and I was working on a program to keep my teeth strong, and they mentioned about eating sourdoughs. And I said, well, let me try sourdoughs and see if that makes a difference in how I feel, my body feels with wheat here. And lo and behold, I noticed, yes, in fact, what they say in the book is true. And I can tell you, I don't get the aches and pains and this, that, and the other thing. Talk a minute about sourdough and what's going on there so that people can understand when they're picking why sourdough bread looks the same as the other bread to me when I look at it, but there's something different going on. Why is it easier for us to deal with?
Well, I think our ancestors were very smart. They knew what foods would make them live and not be unwell, and they knew how to prepare them. So if I can just give you an example of our Australian Aboriginal people, they ate a grain called nardoo. Nardoo, if you eat it raw, will kill you.
Okay.
It won't kill you immediately. What it does is it takes away your B vitamins. So it has an anti-nutrient in it that will not allow you to absorb your B vitamins or utilize the B vitamins. So the Australian Aboriginal people for thousands and thousands of years knew how to prepare it. It had to be soaked, it had to be crushed, it had to be washed, and then it had to be cooked. And that way they could consume this food and not die of it. So our ancestors in white people type of, you know, the way we have eaten grain, we've always done a sourdough with our bread or our wheat, because we must have known or learnt that inherently it was inflammatory. And unless we prepared it properly, it would become an issue. So it was a fermentation process, and there were bugs in there, and those bugs would digest all the amino acids or the proteins down into amino acids. And then when we ate it, we had more bugs. If all of it wasn't digested, it would digest it down. So why is a protein dangerous to the human body versus an amino acid when it enters through the intestinal lining into the blood? So as we digest food in the gut, it breaks down, we put it into the blood system, the blood goes, wow, there's a building block that I can use. Let's put that into the thyroid and let me use that. Or let's make muscle or whatever it is that we need to make. So when it's a protein, sometimes it's seen as the enemy. And what will happen is as it's seen as the enemy, an immune response will happen and we'll create antibodies to it. But let's say that protein has the sequence AABBC, and we eat it for breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, and dinner. The body sees that AABBC and goes, okay, this is a real issue, and I better look for it in the rest of my body and see whether it's going to cause a problem. And you might have that protein strand in your thyroid, and the body will start to attack that thyroid, and that's called molecular mimicry, or there are other reasons behind it. And you'll get Hashimoto's, or you might get Graves' disease. So we need to digest our food, but if we don't prepare it properly, and we do not have the bugs to help us digest it, then we are going to have some real issues, and we're going to increase the amount of allergies, food sensitivities, and intolerances that we now see. So that's the gist of it. It's a first stage of digestion, just like your teeth are, and then your stomach is, and then the small intestine is. It's all required for you to digest these foods to enable us to have the building blocks to build the most beautiful skin, hair, organs, blood systems, heart, everything.
So is it fair enough to say that one of the reasons that things like sourdough bread is easier on our system is because it's almost pre-digested? Would that be a one-liner?
Yeah, that's the best one-liner I've heard. Well done. Look, it is pre-digested, but I want people to be aware that when anything becomes in vogue, the industry would find the best way it can to make it fast and fake it. So be very careful about your sourdoughs and try and find the old-fashioned artisan baker who is actually doing it. And they're just not getting a premix that they add water to, raise it in an hour, and then it goes. So like they do it all the time. I've noticed it even with fermented drinks. You know, they're saying that something is a kombucha, but I've actually seen it with flavors and artificial sugars and all sorts of things in it. And so be very aware. I just want people to be aware that sourdough, make sure it's being done the old-fashioned way.
Wonderful. And so what are some other important points that we need to get from the webinar, or not the webinar, the documentary? I do webinars so much, that's what I'm saying, webinar. The documentary. Okay, so we know now the wheat is different from let me just recap. The wheat from what our ancestor ate is much different than the wheat we eat now, especially in places like America and Australia, which is different than Italy and France. So our supply is different, and there's hybridization, and there's also glyphosate. That's the word.
I know.
So much writing, but I don't say it very much. I see it in writing all the time. I know what it is. i.e., known as Roundup, put out by a company that spends a lot of money to lobby our government, including putting out studies to try to convince us that these things are safe, but we know our body has problems with, one, the hybridization, and two, the chemicals that are standardly used on our crops, and now there are, these substances are put within the food to make them more stronger against insects and things like that. This is what we call pesticides, and so we are having problems with that. Are there other, okay, so is, just a little bit of vernacular, is hybridization the same as GMO or genetically modified? Are they one and the same?
No, we're not taking, genetically modified is taking from one species and gene splicing that into another species. So in order to make, there's something out at the moment called exogenous ketones, or sorry, endogenous ketones. And what they do is they take a gene splice out of a bacteria and they throw it into Escherichia coli, and Escherichia coli then produces these endogenous ketones that people keep eating but don't even know that it's from a genetically modified Escherichia coli. So that's genetically modified. Hybridization is when the nature does it naturally. So nature will pull two things together and they'll cross. And what happens is that there is that hybridization. This was a manipulated hybridization, and what it's a company called BASF are doing at the moment is that they're chemically hybridizing, and they're using a chemical that's very noxious, basically, to hybridize these plants. So no, they're two different things. I think hybridization naturally is the way we've created new plants. But there is the hybridization that's called clearfield wheat that we need to be very careful about as well. But then on top of that, we then put a chemical. So it's There's many things. And by the way, you did talk about Italy, and I just need people to know that the Italians are now becoming the fastest growing group of people with celiac disease, because I believe they are using our wheats. I don't think they're using their traditional wheats in their pastas anymore. They are one of the biggest pasta makers in the world, and I think they're starting to use Western wheat. So just be aware, if you do go to Europe, make sure you go to your artisan bakeries and you get the old, beautiful breads.
Yes. So luckily I get to go in the summer again to visit family. And I'm like, I'm just always amazed at how I can eat all this wonderful stuff and not have a problem. And so that started me on my journey to say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is it so different? So we have several things going on. Now, people are going to say, all right, I hear what you're saying. I hear it's a problem. I think maybe these are problems in my body. It could be. So just go over a little bit problems that people have that are not necessarily digestive issues, which we know everything's a digestive issue really, but don't manifest as digestive symptoms that people have. I said, for instance, I get muscle aches and pain. I can tell if I eat too much wheat, my elbow right here hurts. I tell all my patients, when my elbow right here hurts, I know I had too much. That means stop. Talk about some of the other manifestations of overweighting yourself.
Yeah. Actually, Dr. Veronica, you're listening to your body. That's what you're doing. Your elbow is your indicator. Mine was my sore back, and then eventually it came to my little finger. So I know if I eat wheat, this joint in my finger hurts. So we must listen to our bodies. Instead of what we're doing is we're giving painkillers and not listening anymore. So what we've realized, and we talk about in the documentary, is that it can be so fast that we know that there's a system that's carrying that reaction. Now, if it's called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, so it can manifest as celiac disease, wheat allergy, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or an autoimmune disease. So let's not talk about the autoimmune diseases because, people are talking about them because they've become so rampant. And we won't talk about wheat allergy or celiac disease. Everyone knows about that. But let's just talk about non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So when your body consumes it, and it's not digested, what happens is that there's a belief that it's affecting the nervous system. So where it manifests will depend on your susceptibility. So it may be migraines, it may be headaches, it may be a skin condition, it might be sinus, it could be joints, aches and pains. It may manifest in a body organ such as the heart. And then you may have congestive heart, or you may have heart disease, or it could go anywhere in the body. It could be your big toe, it could be gout that it could cause. So what we're realizing is that there's many symptoms, and I think they've indicated like almost 100 plus symptoms that may manifest as a result of your body not wanting to have that gluten. But what do? We dull that symptom down. We don't listen to our body, and we continue to eat that food. And I know people who know that going off wheat makes them feel good, but they're so addicted to it. They love it so much. It's a part of their life. They're prepared to eat it and put up with their pains. So,
yes. And some of the less talked about symptoms that people can have, I just want to mention a few, are it can attack your brain, your cerebellum, and you can have balance issues, or you can have what's called ataxia, where you're having problems with your balance, but also with your eyes. I'm an ophthalmologist originally by training. You can get what's called nystagmus, where your eyes shake back and forth. And so for anyone who has a symptom that when they go to the doctor, it's been worked up and can't be explained, the first thing I would say is stop wheat. That's the first thing I would say. So if you realize, like, let's talk about balance for a second, because that's something that if you're tripping and falling, if you notice you can't balance as well, you think, oh, it's just going away with age. And yeah, there is some decline, but you may notice a big difference just from stopping wheat. Now, what do we do? Oh my gosh, I have clients who are Italians, and everything that's on the food sensitivity list is their whole diet because that's their culture. Gets complicated, and wheat is it. Okay, what do we do? We're weeded everywhere. And one mention is, you said it's everywhere. I had a client come in the other day, and I said, I want you to bring in all your supplements, because I want to go over all your supplements, and so we can figure out if they're good or not good. I don't want to just trash them and say, I want to give you access to professional grade that we know are okay, but I want to show you what to look for in the bottle. So when you go to the store, you'll have some idea whether it's good or not. So as I'm going through a supplement there, I picked up one, which was a probiotic. Probiotics are all the rage now. And I said, this one is not good. It has wheat and soy in it. I just turned over the bottle. It says contains wheat and soy. Now, I don't know why they put wheat and soy in the probiotic. Don't know. But I said, this is something where they have the two allergens that's going to hurt your digestive system. And especially for your problem, they're both in the pill that you're taking that you're thinking is the one that's going to help you the most. So that's an example of how vigilant you have to be. You think I'm taking a supplement, I'm doing something good for myself, and lo and behold, you're doing the opposite. You went off wheat, but it's in your supplement. What else? Where else?
And this is the issue, is that many things are made from wheat. So vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, it's actually not vitamin C, it's ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid meaning ascorbic, meaning stop scurvy. So it's not vitamin C. It's a section of vitamin C. It's made from wheat. Glucose syrup is made from wheat. Maltodextrose is made from wheat. So we explain that in our programs so that people understand where it's coming from. There are medications for thyroid disease that have wheat in them that continue to activate the immune system to eat the thyroid. It's just like you.
Okay, so now I did not know that. I did not know that one right there. So now there may be difference between Australia and America, but I know you deal with a lot of people in America now. Name some of the medicines that people could be on that are made from wheat or contain wheat, that are thyroid medicines.
Well, they're changing them all the time. So and your names are very different to the names that we use. But what you do is that you ask your pharmacist, you have to get it from your pharmacist anyway. You ask your pharmacist, is there any wheat in these drugs? Take your drugs to the pharmacist and find out, because you're giving up wheat, but you're taking it in your medicines. So I'm very vigilant as I'm reading everything, and your pharmacist should be able to tell you, because he will have, like, I remember going into a pharmacy one day and saying, can I have an antibiotic without the flavors, the colorings, the artificial whatevers? And he just looked at me blankly and he went, but we don't do that. It all comes formulated. And I went, are you serious? I can't get an antibiotic for an antibiotic. He said, it'll be bitter tasting. And I went, I don't care. Just, anyway, this is what happens. So you will have to ask your pharmacist, read your labels, read everything. Get the list from us that tells you exactly, how to, what it is in and what it's made of. The documentary tells you a lot of what's in it. And we have Dr. Terry Walls on the documentary. And yeah, she's just beautiful. And she, had multiple sclerosis. She can't even have makeup on her face that has gluten in it without it setting off a reaction in her nervous system. That's how sensitive she is. So, and like she said, it's very individual. You just got to check it out and see what's right for you and what's not right for you. So it can be in conditioners, shampoos, anything you put on your skin. So the way I say to people towards the end of the documentary, we talk about, let's get back to the basics. Let's stop putting like cosmetics on our body that have got 150 ingredients in it. What's wrong with jojoba oil? What's wrong with, almond oils or things like that, and old-fashioned ways that we used to do things? What's wrong with going to our local markets and getting the foods from our farmer, and we know that they haven't used chemicals on it or glyphosate on it, which is destroying our gut bacteria? Let's get back to the kitchen. I know that that's a foreign thing, but if we start feeding our family with the basics of food, we will heal a nation. As individuals, we will heal a nation, but we must get back in the kitchen. Stop eating those foods that are packaged and are basically subsidized by your government. They're not cheap foods. They are actually very expensive foods, not only to your government, to your health, but to the planet. So if we can go back and just say, I as an individual, I'm going to go and I'm going to make a difference, because we're never going to change our government. We're never going to change the health system or anything like that. But as individuals, we can be amazing as consumers. So that's what I talk about, is let's go back to basics. When you get into the habit, as we talked about in the beginning, if we do it step by step, bit by bit, we stop buying breakfast cereals. What else can we have for breakfast? There is an enormous amount of beautiful foods available to us, and they're delicious.
Yeah.
Like, seriously,
That's my number one
of flour.
The number one question I get is, what am I supposed to eat for breakfast? That's the number one, the most difficult meal for Americans. I don't know about Australians, but Americans, it's something wheat-based and coffee. and when I'm starting people out, I know that everything that they're eating for breakfast, they're going to have to, at a time, eliminate, so we can figure out what's a problem, what's not a problem. Exactly. And the number one question is, well, what do I eat for breakfast? And it's a change in habit and a perception and thinking, because some of the food that you may eat for breakfast, you may well say, well, that's not really a breakfast food. And then people start doing it, they get into the habit and they're okay with it, especially because they're feeling better, because they're feeling better.
Exactly. And when you look at that's not a breakfast food, well, that's just a habit. Look at Asia. If you go to Asia, they eat rice and vegetables and for breakfast. So it's just what you get used to, and it is about changing your life. And if you continue to do what you're doing right now, you're going to continue to get the same results. So every week, I'm going to change one thing, and I'm going to concentrate on that one thing. And it could be as simple as changing one ingredient in your pantry that you're using, and then building on it. But if you're in crisis, you need to do this now. This is not something that you can go, oh, I'll change one thing a month, because you might in 12 months be in so much crisis that you can't even think straight in order to make these changes. And that's what happens as you get to that point. It's too hard. It's too hard. I can't even think how to do it. I have people, I have an education program, and I have people who do the education program and are trying to help sick people, but it's just too hard for them. And so we have to look at ways to manage their schedules and their life in order to change them. So and that's what I do. I help people change their life. I help them change their habits. I either do it step by step, or I send them to someone who has the time that can coach them through this whole program.
Yes. And so you mentioned that you have a program. Now, here's the thing. People say, I'm busy, and how do I do it? And the other thing is, you get the people say, well, I got to go do research. And so starting number one, Cyndi has done the research for you, and it's in the documentary. So you could sit down, watch the documentary. There's your research. But my question is, did you do a research before you ate all that stuff that was bad for you? When a doctor gives you an antibiotic, did you do the research? When you decide you're using that hair shampoo, did you do the research? When you go out and eat that hamburger at TGI Fridays, did you do the research? And the answer to that obviously is no. So why, when we are telling things to you that are health promoting, all of a sudden you got to do a bunch of research about it? If it's bad for you, no research necessary. If we're telling you what's good for you, all of a sudden you got to do research. Now I know, and the reason why I'm saying this is because biggest procrastination technique that I come across is I got to do research. All right. Number one procrastination technique. Number two procrastination technique is it's too expensive. Now, let me tell you what's expensive. Being sick is really expensive. And if you think that I have insurance and so therefore it's paid for, think about how many people go bankrupt who have insurance from big hospital bills and everything. And let's not talk about you being a burden on your family and society, and nobody wants to be around you because nobody likes to be around sick people. So just on my high horse. Let's talk a moment about your program, because Cyndi has agreed for when you see this, there will be a link and a code and bonuses if you sign up through me. So if you just go to the website and you sign up, you get it normally. If you use the stuff in the show notes, you're going to get a discount. I find good people with good stuff to help you change your life. So let's talk a minute about your program. We want you to be able to actually implement the change. So in order to implement the change, Cyndi has a tool. Tell us a little bit about that.
So what it's called is 6 weeks, no wheat. And what it will do is it will give you options, lots of recipes, but will also give you more information over and above the documentary. So we may have just touched on bread. Well, we give you information about bread. So you can do this research by just looking at the program. So you'll get more information. We'll give you more interviews from the people that are in the documentary that will give you so much more information, because in a documentary that goes for just over an hour, you can only put snippets in of a 2-hour interview that I've done with them. So you can, find more information that way. So it is basically a step-by-step program on how to find different things in the grocery store, if that's the only place that you can get your food from. So we teach you about where to go in the grocery store in order to find these types of foods. And we also teach you about why you need to make these changes and why you are making these changes. And, just like we talked about sourdough bread, we talk about, these sourdough breads that are fake sourdough breads. So we go through all of that, and we go right through every meal, every snack. We give you that list of all of the ingredients that are made from wheat that you may not even know about. We give you what is flavor, what is behind the word flavor. There are 48 chemicals and they don't even tell you these chemicals. They don't have to put a little bracket after it and go, oh, by the way, there's solvents and diactyls and vanillin, synthetic vanilla, and there's this and there's that. And it's not like when you dissect an apple and you see the chemicals of an apple. This is man getting these chemicals, putting them together and going, oh, well, now that tastes like a banana. So we do all of that and educate you, because I believe education gives you power, but putting that into action is probably the most powerful thing that you can do. And when people put it into action, they see miracles. And that's what I love watching. And they're my heroes.
And this is great, because a lot of people decide for a short time to go off of wheat and gluten, and then they want to say, well, what do I do now? Or I miss this or that, and what do I replace it with so I still feel satisfied? And when you collect in a holistic community, it's nice because you go places where people are doing the same thing, and so you can get all these delicious foods and you get to see their array. But you're the normal everyday person, I feel for my clients, because their whole family's doing something different. All their friends are doing something different, and now they're going on the health situation, and they're feeling like they're pariahs. So first, I want everybody to know, When you have your friend who's a diabetic or a hypertensive and they say, I don't eat this or that because they have diabetes or hypertensive, nobody looks at them strange. Everybody's okay. So when you say you don't eat wheat, don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. Okay? Because that's the first thing. People feel that they say they don't eat something or that they don't want to be the different one. I don't want to be picked out. Well, if you were a diabetic and you said, well, I don't eat this. And the reason why diabetics are diabetics is because they do eat it. They don't really not eat it or they wouldn't be a diabetic. So know that first of all. And just because they're putting artificial sweetener, and that's a whole nother show, artificial sweetener into, or they're drinking the Diet Coke. Notice they're drinking the Diet Coke, but they always have dessert. You people with the wheat, you can do this. You can do this. You can do this. And the reason why I've had several people who are in this field on is because I would like people to find the program that works for them. But here's a place where you can start with the documentary that teaches you about it. And then you decide for yourself whether or not you feel it's valid. Instead of having to go out and do all the research on University of Google, it's right there in the documentary, so you can kick back eating some popcorn, because that doesn't have wheat-free, but we can talk about how you have to make your popcorn too, but you can still make it good and to be tasty. Wheat-free popcorn, kick back, watch the documentary. That's your research. Very well, talking to all the experts. Mm-hmm. And then when you just say, okay, I'd like to do this, Cyndi has a program where you can do this, 6 weeks, no wheat. And I'm like, all right, see, I like to try people's programs too. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to try this program. And I'm going to try it so that I can say, hey, we're going to do a wheat thing. Everybody in my community, let's go off the wheat. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to use Cyndi's program. This is the best one. I mean, and let me just say this. Let me say this again. Although Cyndi has a documentary and a good program, if you think something else works for you, by all means, use it. No excuses. Use whatever you feel works for you. Parting words, Cyndi.
To go off wheat can be very dramatic. And I think my parting words is from a gentleman who watched it in New York, and he'd been in wheelchairs. He had been sick for 20 years. No one told him to go off wheat. He went off wheat. 2 weeks later, he calls Australia and tells us how it has absolutely changed his life and his health. Don't think that just this minor food that we consume that people think is, oh, it's a food, we've been eating it for thousands of years, can't make the biggest difference of all. So that I guess, try it. Give it a go. You can't do a test for non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Give it a go and see what happens.
Yes. Wonderful. Cyndi O'Meara, thank you so much for your work. I'm glad somebody is out there doing it. All of us practitioners have to work together and collaborate to help people be healthy. The information is right there. Thank you so much for doing a documentary, because everybody likes to Netflix binge.
Thank you, Dr. Veronica.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more on how to bring wellness into your life, visit drveronica.com. See you all next week. Take care.